Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and welcome to our first webinar in this webinar series called AI for Science. Thank you so much for joining. As you can see here on the slide already, today we're exploring how verified citations can strengthen AI tools, turning them from hallucination-prone assistants into trustworthy research partners. Really a challenge that matters whether you're a researcher, publisher, or anyone working with scientific content. Before we dive right in, let me introduce the friendly faces that you can see here already. We have Josh Nicholson on the call here today. He's the co-founder of Cite, as well as Chief Strategy Officer at Research Solutions, the company to which Cite belongs, as well as Chris Bendel. He's the VP of Strategy and Corporate Development at Research Solutions and Cite. And allow me to introduce myself. My name is Julia Heason. Some of you might already know me. I'm on the marketing team here at Research Solutions, and I'll be your moderator. So feel free to reach out to me in the chat if you have any technical issues, any technical questions. And also we have down on Zoom below, we have Q&A enabled. So feel free to add your questions as they come up. We will have dedicated time toward the end to answer your questions. So feel free to add them so you don't forget, but just know that we'll be answering them at the end of the webinar. Okay, I think that's as much introduction as I wanted to give. Josh, over to you.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. AI is distracting me. And so, yeah, we've given a similar talk on this about a year ago. And so some slides will be new, but some slides will be old, but we have a lot of new slides. And I think this is one of them, right? So historically, we were asking, are you using generative AI? And I think nowadays, as we do polls, as publishers do polls, increasingly it's going from, are you using it to how many people are using it and how are you using it? So I wanted to ask, or we wanted to ask, what are the most important things for you to consider when you're going from Claude to ChatGPT to Perplexity to Cite to Gemini? What do you choose, right? What are the most important things for you to consider when using generative AI? And so that's the first question. And we have some selections for you. Is it quality? Is it privacy? Is it integration with existing workflows? And then, a third or a second question, which I think relates to this talk and obviously relates to what Cite does. Do you trust LLM answers without citations, right? Do we think citations are something that will need to be a core part, and I wouldn't say hallucinated citations, but real citations from LLMs, right? And how are you getting these? Are you turning these on with the web mode? Are you using more deeper reasoning models, etc.? And so we'll give you some time to answer these. I don't know if you want me to talk through all the different possibilities, but yeah, hopefully we can have a little bit of a discussion on this and then can jump into the talk.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much, Josh. Yeah, I can already see about half of folks here on the call have submitted their answer. Thank you so much. I can see kind of like little bars jumping up and down. So let's just give everyone another minute or so, and then we can share the results here. Okay, I think we've got pretty much everyone. Okay, let me share this. This is interesting.
Oh, so can everyone see this, Julia?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for the first question, quality control and LLMs, what are the most important things for you to consider when using generative AI? A lot of people say quality, source verification, accuracy and trustworthiness of outputs seems to be the biggest one, which I think is funny because this is probably the biggest challenge they have. Data privacy concern, integration with existing workflows. Also, a lot of people responding, yes, bias mitigation, fairness, and then time and efficiency gains. And so maybe that's, less of a, kind of most important thing because I think a lot of them are providing some of this, if I would interpret that. But yes, trust I think is a big one, which is paramount here for the use of them and very relevant for what we're going to discuss. And then do you trust LLM answers without citations? Some people said yes, and I can certainly see that in certain cases, right? If you ask it something very specific, you're not always going to need a citation. However, if you are doing some research or asking, pointed questions, oftentimes you do want to go look at the source of that information, whether that's a web page, whether that's a research article, or whether that's even just the thinking of the model, right? And so I think some models are doing pretty good showing exactly how they're coming up with these different search sequences, et cetera. And so, yeah, I think depends on the topic or complexity, certain makes sense. I also think a big change from the last time we gave this talk is that, citations were not kind of de facto in these tools, whereas they are becoming that today. And I think, if you've tried a variety of the different tools, you'll see they went from completely fabricating, hallucinations to now they're, certainly citing things, but is that actually what the citation says? Are there better sources for this citation, et cetera? So yeah, thanks everyone for participating on that. So this is a little bit of a preview of what we're going to work on. And I'm going to kind of just show this, talk a little bit about this, talk a little bit about how we got here. And then at the very end, we'll also do a short live demo walking through this, right? And so to me, LLMs are very powerful, right? Very easy to use, very flexible. I've launched an entire website and I'm not a developer using LLMs. I connect it, into different tasks that I have here at work, whether that's, collating stuff from my emails into organized files, etc. And so this is evident by the, increase in how many users are using LLMs so quickly that I do think people are finding value out of them, right? They're finding use. I don't think people are just spending all their times in LLMs because they're wasting time, although that certainly is the case. But LLMs are very powerful and very flexible, and many software development tasks, like there's large pronouncements even this week saying everything is going to be AI generated, which is maybe quite scary, but also maybe the reality. And so we've had that discussion internally, right? Okay, people are starting to really live in these tools, whether that's ChatGPT, whether that's Claude, whether that's any kind of generative tool, whether that's Copilot that your organization licenses. And so, we recognize that these tools are better than us in certain cases doing certain things, right? We're not going to try and compete with trillion-dollar companies that, have hordes of engineers developing all these things. And so we want to, and we've always had this strategy to, meet users where they are, whether that's in other traditional tools. So we have integrations on publisher pages, we have integrations with publication planning tools, or now with LLMs. So what I'm showing here on the left is a screenshot from Claude, and that's showing a site connector integrating into Claude. That would allow you to say, hey, citations and sources do matter to me, so I'm going to use cite to make sure it's searching through the literature. You could toggle on or off web search and say, I only want to ask this question and I only want peer-reviewed literature back from it. Again, you might use a site connector for that, or you might, even connect to your Gmail and different things like this. So we are starting to integrate and go into these tools via model context protocols or MCPs or connectors, but really building this bridge in there. And then on the right side, you'll see this from ChatGPT. Again, it's showing kind of a little bit of the thinking, and then it's generating the response. And so this is something that we're actively working on. I think this is relevant for researchers, for organizations, and then also for publishers, where we're actively discussing, how can these tools help safely connect peer-reviewed literature into LLMs in a way that's copyright compliant, that tracks usage, and can really, I would say, drive people to accurate sources as opposed to, maybe easy open blog posts online. And so before getting to that webinar, how did we get here, right? Why are we even talking about MCPs? What are the challenges that we've faced, et cetera? And so, here we've already kind of touched upon this, but, how can we trust ChatGPT? I think, the fact that 88% or something like that said, they don't trust LLMs without citations highlights that I think citations are crucial, right? And I think citations, and I'm not just saying this because I'm the cite guy, have been a big part of information organization and discovery for a long time. Go to the next one. Um, and that is kind of, this question of how do we trust stuff online or how do we just trust stuff is not necessarily a new one, right? We have had, I would say, kind of Cambrian jumps into new technologies where we've had to figure out how can we know what is trustworthy or not, right? And so Here, if you look at the date ranges, we're talking about, almost 30 years ago at this point. Uh, the emergence of the web was similar to the emergence of LLMs, right? There's the massive increase of information, the massive ease of information of creating that information, and then the easiness of accessibility, right? And so I think the web page was doubling, growing exponentially at one point. How could a user know that this is from, you know, a trusted source, or this is from a source that's pretending to be this trusted source? And so there was a lot of different tools out there, Ask Jeeves, all these funny ones that would look at this. What I think emerged is what we're seeing here was directly influenced by citations. And if you look at the PageRank paper that we referenced on the last slide, you'll see that they reference academic citation analysis to say, hey, not all web pages are created the same. We should start to look at and rank pages based on how they are cited, how they cite others, and then start to weight this. And so PageRank, I think, really helped, and is one reason that I think Google emerged over many of the other services is that they just produced more trustworthy results. And I do think that is something that we're seeing across these giant competitors is which ones are producing the most trustworthy results, right? And I think that will increase adoption, not just at the individual use case, but at the enterprise and organizational level as well, because again, it is easy to get an answer, almost too easy, and so I think paramount here is trust, and I do think citations, like they had in the early days of the web, will play a part here. So, again, the early days of the web is a good example where we were confronted with similar problems to ChatGPT. Also, good example where citations helped. I would say Wikipedia is another one, right? Wikipedia, if you think about it, is kind of crazy, right? It is crowdsourced. Anyone can write any line on it. As an undergrad, we used to go to UC Santa Cruz and write something funny about us. It would immediately be deleted and removed. And so, how can this crowdsourced, publicly available online encyclopedia work, right? Amazing moderation, amazing community behind it, so amazing people behind it, but then also, this need for citations needed, right? And I think that phrase really kind of comes from Wikipedia, where it's like, okay, you wrote that. Where do I verify that? Where does the reader verify that? And so I think Wikipedia works for a variety of different reasons, but I think one of the key things that it does is that it will say citation needed and citations will be sourced. And there's, a whole cadre of users and anyone can kind of be a user to make sure that the best citations, or at least citations, are accurate for different claims. So, again, I've kind of answered this a little bit, but I would say, can citations help with LLMs? And if you remember that first kind of preview slide, I think the answer is yes, right? I think that citations and bridging, kind of information, whether that's a citation to an email, a citation to a peer-reviewed article, I think we're going to start to see that emerge, especially with, ChatGPT launching app stores and especially with these connectors being more commonplace. And so, yes, I think is the short answer, but we'll talk about how. And so again, here's Gemini. If you look through these, and we can kind of go through these somewhat fast, Julia, you'll start to see next to each of these are different references, right? So again, it's not just to say there is the truth, but there is a link to learn more, and then that learn more you can click through and open. I would say here, a lot of people are probably not, clicking through and reading these. And so I do think that is also a challenge with citations, that it's not enough to just say, hey, there it is, because people are using these tools as kind of answer engines. And if you get your answer and you say, okay, it's in Scientific American, must be trustworthy, that can produce some challenges. And so I think how we display citations, and that's something we're also working on, is critical. And I would also say, looking at the context and kind of snippets, again, looking at how Google returns a search result to you, you can see a snippet of context. You can trust it. You can start to understand, okay, that is what it says. And so I think there is the fact of needing citations, and then how we display citations, I think is kind of the next evolution that we'll start to see from these different tools. So again, Perplexity, just showing you different ways of how citations are used. These are all using the web. So these are all still, going out and accessing what they can. They are not going behind the paywall. And I think what we are developing, what, some large publishers are developing are saying, okay, it's great that, these tools can interact with research articles, but there's still, I would say, the majority of content locked away, right? How do we bridge this access? How do we get access not just to what is open or what is free, but what is the best? And oftentimes that might be behind a paywall in a subscription journal. And so, you're starting to see publishers and you're starting to see groups like us explore and bridge that gap. So, again, I think we started as a very small group focused on citations. Not a ton of people cared about this. We were looking at improving academic citations, but they are coming to be very crucial here now in today's world. And I saw this great article recently um, that described our kind of shift from research documents to knowledge objects. And so I think this reframing looks a little bit about how LLMs are interacting with content and how we are interacting with content. People are going and reading less full text articles. They're even using AI to kind of read these articles themselves. And what they're getting are knowledge objects, right? And knowledge objects might be snippets, it might be answers, etc. And so I think we're starting to see this shift from that traditional document into different objects of discovery and answers. And I think citations, and I think in particular smart citations, are going to start to serve this need. So, um, why did we start Scite, right? We didn't know that LLMs were coming. I am not an AI expert, although I give now a lot of webinars on AI. I'm a cell biologist, right? And so where did Scite start from? How do we have this access to research articles? Why did we start creating, this next generation of citations ahead of ChatGPT even being launched? Well, the problem is that, citations have been used in academic literature as a proxy for quality, right? And so quality and researchers being researchers has started to become, called into question. And so here's a paper that got a lot of my attention towards the end of my PhD, which was, hey, most major cancer studies can't be validated. That's a problem, right? And so if we go to the next slide, you can see that this, started to emerge from that Nature paper, has been seen in other papers, and was a big concern. I would say is less discussed now because AI is maybe taken over, but there's these trust concerns, these reproducibility crisis, if you will. How do we know that this is trustworthy research? Not just that it's been published in a journal, not that just that it's been cited, but how do we know that this is trustworthy, right? Can we build our own research off of it? Are we wasting billions of dollars on irreproducible research to tell nice stories and to get into flashy journals, uh, what have you? And so this problem, which I would say impacts all of us because we're all taxpayers and funding a lot of the publicly funded research, was maybe only kind of considered in scientific circles. I don't think everyone was thinking about citations and LLMs, whereas I do think they are starting to think about them now, and they are starting to kind of question, like, okay, is that right? Where are you making this up? ChatGPT, let me see the citation. And so, go to the next slide, please. So we, wrote a paper on that. That paper basically suggests what we thought would be a solution. And kind of funny enough, back in 2014, we didn't think we could build this solution, right? So we said, hey, metrics are here. They're being used to assess quality, veracity, but there are some shortcomings, right? What if we could, instead of just looking at, how many times an article's been cited, see how an article's been cited? And so we wrote this paper back in 2014, and it's kind of funny to look at this because we suggest some of our competitors actually building this, and then slowly started to work on this from the side. And so the idea behind this was that, we should be able to incentivize and identify scientific veracity or reproducibility by looking at, have peers supported something? Have they challenged it, et cetera? So yeah, this is kind of this R factor. I would say we're not really discussing or using an R factor, but the idea is kind of still there, which is, has this paper been supported? How has it been cited? Why has it been cited? Where has it been cited? Right? Again, a paper might be extremely highly cited because it's being cited in the method section. It might be cited only a few times, but it might be independently verified from a group that pre-registered their hypotheses, right? And so there are different reasons of citing, different ways of citing an article, and we're trying to capture that through Cite, which is not only beneficial to research literature, but also beneficial, I would say, to LLMs. So this is Cite, and we can probably jump through some of these quickly. This is Cite back in 2018, right? So here's the context. And if you start to think about this context, looking at here's a PubMed ID, you can start to imagine, okay, I can now kind of see here's not just how this article has been cited, but here's how this sentence has been cited. And so we're taking all these snippets of information, these knowledge objects, if you will, making them discoverable and making them discoverable at the article level, at the researcher level, at the journal level, and as I hinted and teased, at the LLM level, because I think that is where it's going to start to be really critical, is when you use these things in important areas of research. Is this enough to see that that article exists? And how has that article been cited? And what is the information source? So not just how has it been cited, but here is this snippet of information that we're sourcing that from. So yeah, again, walking through this very quickly. In today's world, looking at my own research article, you might click through that citation and you would see a list of citing articles, which would look something like this. I would say, as much as I think a lot of us are kind of living in the future, we are still living, many of us, in today's present, or maybe this is a little inflammatory, in the past, right? And I think we are still allocating large amounts of money based on pure citation counts, right? There is looking at, okay, this university published these articles, they had X number of citations, they get that much money, right? In some cases, maybe that's an oversimplification, but it's not so far from the truth. And so I think the number of citations and the track of citations, has not really been brought into this age. And, we are starting to see more advancements from traditional citation indices looking at these things. And I think we are going to start to see, generative AI look more at impact as well. And so this is, a traditional list. You'll see that all citations are treated mostly the same. Can't tell how this article's been cited, why it's been cited, unless you open 66 different documents. And if you're talking about, maybe tens or hundreds of researchers and thousands of documents, no one has the time to see how and why the research has been cited. So we default to brand names, journal brand names, percentiles, or just simple citation counts and H indices and things like this. And so I think the tools are there now. Again, I can create a website in today's world where I couldn't probably just 4 months ago or maybe a month ago even. And so, we're going to start to see changes here, I think, with citations and with impact assessment as well. And so through the lens of Cite, you will start to see, and maybe we can go to the next one just to zoom it in. You will start to see that, it's not just a list of titles, it's these knowledge objects, these smart citations that show the citation context, that show, where we grab that context, that show if it's been supported or challenged, etc. And so this is, I would say, our big differentiator. And I think what is going to be, whether it's through us or whether it's through anyone, going to be how research articles engage with LLMs, right? And if you look at what Wiley's doing here, they are chunking up their articles into these snippets that interact with LLMs. And so, no, you can stay on that slide. And so, looking here, again, a big differentiator on Cite from, say, ChatGPT and from other tools is that, we've been Cite.ai since 2018. We've been signing indexing agreements to use AI to do citation analysis since day one, right? And that means getting full text access to the literature, paywalled open access, and then being able to analyze and extract out and display citation statements. And so that's not necessarily an easy thing because there is, on the next slide, there's a technical challenge. There's also a legal challenge, right? You need to work with publishers to get these agreements, and you need to do it in a way that makes sense, that is trustworthy to them, and that provides publishers value. So the first thing is signing indexing agreements. We've signed about 40 to date. We continue to sign new ones. That has helped by coming together with Research Solutions, where we work with hundreds, if not thousands, of publishers to provide DocDel. The second challenge is the technical one. This is maybe less of a challenge, again, now because groups have LLMs, and LLMs are pretty powerful for a lot of these things. But to build Cite, we, built a pretty unique pipeline that would go through and extract out all these citation statements and then classify them at scale. And so, those are the two big things we have our kind of own unique ingestion mechanisms, and then we're going ahead and extracting this out from the full text of our literature provided by partners, which is all groups. And so I think that's one thing to consider when you look at these different tools, like, okay, I'm doing research. This LLM can use this most advanced LLM. Which are the ones that can actually look at the literature? Because you can have the best LLM if it can't interact with the most relevant article, there's a gap there. And every tool is going to have gaps, but I think, we are probably, and, again, maybe without hyperbole, have the most coverage where you can use AI for some of these analyses here. And sorry, I am rushing quickly, but we have a lot of slides and also trying to get through this. So, we published on this. I think this is also important. We're going to start to publish more papers on this. The problem is the field is moving so quickly, it's hard to publish a paper because I feel like our paper would be quickly out to date. And then we would have to keep publishing more and more papers. But, I do think it's important to understand how different systems work, especially if we're talking about pedagogy. Being able to explain, okay, here's how the system works, here's what we mean by smart citations, here's the limitations, etc. All that I think will become important in teaching. So yeah, again, we can kind of jump through these. We are starting to become a standard. We do work with publishers. We do display this on the version of record. Here it is on Wiley. You can see our information there. We are starting to now work with some different ranking agencies. We provide citations to Financial Times, where they do business school rankings. And then, we are also exploring at the government level, providing our data in conjunction with other data sources to start to look at different ways of assessing impact and veracity of research. So yeah, again, these are just a variety of different ways of looking at this, but you can start to see it applied on applied physiology, PNAS, et cetera, different ways of starting to look at this. And this, again, I've already kind of given away this. We're also starting to bring these citations into LLMs, right? And so, ChatGPT very early on would completely fabricate things. It still does that to some sense, but in many cases, it is using a web search, and it is providing that article. And so, I'd say, found ourselves in the right place at the right time with content to launch Site Assistant. Site Assistant, or maybe, I forgot this slide, is really kind of like a ChatGPT for research. It allows you to make LLMs more trustworthy. And so you can use Site Assistant, which is going into our world, and then, what we're building here is going into the other LLMs to provide that trust, to provide a benchmark, to provide, I would say, a citation of the LLM age. And so not just, hey, this is an interesting side project or these are academic citations, but these are academic citations that Claude uses, that ChatGPT uses, etc. And so I always kind of like to acknowledge Eugene Garfield. He was a big influence on what we've built. I got to speak with him before he passed away back in 2013. We're actually doing something else, which I'm not going to announce on this webinar, that he also had done. But, we thought we were kind of so clever thinking of a new way to assess impact and looking at, hey, supporting citations, things like this. But here is in the 60s, Eugene Garfield talking about a way to automate citation and to add things. And so he says these markers, citation markers, what he's referring to, would appear in a published citation index along with the usual citation. And so he's talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could see that this citation is a critiquing citation? This one is a citation where its data is spurious, all right? It's calling it a question or conclusions wrong. And, very presciently, he says that to do this, an intelligent machine would examine a new document and generate a critical statement such as rather poor paper. So this is kind of like where we are, right? It's not just cite and what we're doing smart citations. You're starting to see LLMs be used for peer review. I know not all publishers are using it. It's certainly being used at the conference level. There's amazing tools that professors are developing. There's one called Refine Inc., which I think is quite powerful, starting to look at and generate and look at these papers, right? And I think it's starting to put together these pieces of the puzzle where these intelligent machines are helping us sift through, are helping us identify and examine documents, and in some cases generate these statements such as rather poor paper. And so I think we are in this world already, and we need to start to, make sure we're using these systems in trustworthy, scalable ways, which again, I think is where citations and I think kind of looking into the thought process, if you will, of the systems makes sense. So yeah, I will pass it to Chris, who can walk through, and then he'll turn it back over to me, and we can do a quick run through for the demo, and then open it up for questions.
All right. Thanks, Josh. So what we heard about there was really sort of the foundations, the ideas behind site search, behind site assistant, which is, a software, a tool which has been designed specifically for discovering content and looking at content from scholarly publications for students and faculty at universities, for researchers from corporate organizations, from government and healthcare organizations as well. But of course, as highlighted at the top of the call by Josh, we realize that not all of you will be using Cite, and we want to also go to where the user is. And these days, many users, many researchers and students are relying on tools, more generic generative AI tools, such as those shown here, for their content discovery. But as also highlighted, often getting results back which are not based on reliable citation data and most likely do not or benefit from insights from the full text of these scholarly content items, especially if they are items that are behind a paywall. Here on this next slide, what we see is that, moving on from those more generic tools, especially, major corporate organizations, and here we're looking at academic organizations who are looking to provide a more customized, more bespoke experience for their users, but using generative AI tools. So we have on the left here, University of Michigan and the Arizona State University, both which have been done a lot of work leveraging a variety of different large language models to create customized, bespoke experiences for their students and faculty. On the right-hand side at the top, we have the Apertus project. This is a Swiss project supported by the EPFL, ETH Zurich, and the Swiss National Supercomputing Center, who wanted to create, large language model trained to reflect, some principles which are important to them and Swiss society as a whole in terms of security and privacy and transparency and diversity. And then finally, the bottom right, there we see from University of New South Wales, Sydney, that they are, now have enterprise access to ChatGPT edu, so a version of ChatGPT specifically designed for the higher education space. But while, they have these more bespoke experiences, they too lack mostly that access then to reliable citation data and to insights from content full text. At the same time, generative AI is becoming more agentic. What we mean by that is becoming more autonomous. Agentic AI are generative AI systems which are able to plan an entire workflow and act on that plan. Imagine asking a generative AI or agentic AI system to plan your holiday. It can create an itinerary, but then it needs to interact with a variety of tools to actually book that itinerary, to book the hotels, to book the flights, to book the restaurants, and so on. So these agentic AI systems need to be able to interact with these different tools. And the way they are now doing that is via what was mentioned at the top of the core, a model context protocol. This is essentially a standard way for these tools to interact with a variety of different external tools. The model context protocol was created in late 2024 by Anthropic. It quickly gained a lot of traction, not only in the tech industry, but across the whole community, wanting to leverage AI agents, and is now really seen as a standard way for AI agents to interact with different tools. It has since been given over to the Linux Foundation, a nonprofit an independent organization which will continue to evolve the MCP and iterate upon it. Critical in the case of index content is that for the MCP to work well, you're not expecting the AI agent to search through the complete full text of every content item every time you're asking it to find a specific answer. Instead, all those content items are chunked up into snippets, which are then indexed in a way to enable the agent to leverage the MCP to quickly find the relevant content item, but also the relevant answers from within those content items, which it can then put into an answer for you. Here you can see like a general flowchart of how that would happen. You are asking your prompt, your question. The AI agent is then leveraging, for instance, our PAM Publisher MCP to create an answer and synthesize an answer from across all the content which is indexed in that MCP. At the moment, we've launched this MCP. It's based on all open access scholarly content at the moment, but also includes the metadata and most abstracts to other scholarly content items as well. At the end of this particular workflow, you see that once you've got your answer, there are then solid links, citations that you can link through to your institutional subscriptions or through our document delivery product to actually gain access to the version of record and then do further analysis with your AI agent on that version of record. But it's not only restricted to scholarly content. If we click one more time, or two more times, there are other sources of information that you may want to combine with your prompt. You may want to be asking and interrogating information not only from the scholarly published content, but also from internal information. Or there might be other types of data sets like patents or clinical trial data that you want to combine into your answer. Now with the AI agents, you are able to do this by assigning the different connectors to these different types of information to allow it to interrogate, to find information and synthesize it into your output. On the next slide, the final slide here is a very key point around model context protocols and this type of infrastructure, especially for scholarly content, and especially related to those in your organizations who are responsible for subscribing to content, but also for publishers as well. The key issue is that as users use generic AI tools more and more for content discovery, they are often happy for a lot of use cases to take the summary as is and not necessarily click through to the version of record. That means that there are a lot of use of actual scholarly content by these AI tools, which is being missed, that we're not counting. And this means that for customers, they have a blind spot to a lot of usage data, which would actually help them to prove the return on investment for subscriptions they're making. And for publishers as well, it also means that they are lacking a lot of data about the importance and impact of their publications because this type of usage, this AI usage, is not currently being tracked. With the MCP infrastructure, this is now allowing some of this usage to be tracked because as the AI agent calls the MCP, each of these calls can be tracked. And as it looks it through and sifts through all these different items, all this information can be measured and we can give this information back to customers and back to publishers as well. All right, with that, I'll hand back to Josh and we'll go through a bit of a demo providing an example of the new MCP connector.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so I am going to run you through a few different things, basically showing how we're starting to connect into tools, how that looks across different tools, how that works with Cite. This is still a prototype, and so I've preloaded some, but we're going to also try some live so we can all see, kind of how this process works. So, here I am in Claude. It's saying happy Wednesday to me. Very nice. I'm going to put in a question that, reflects my background of research. does trisomy, does an extra chromosome increase the rate of chromosomes having errors when they're dividing in cancer cells? So here you see the model used. You can select different models. Here you can see it's searching the web. What you can also do, though, is go to connectors. And so this is where the site connector comes in. You will start to see, I think, more and more connectors. It's amazingly connecting to, Drive. So this might be, as Chris said, your internal documents. This might be a publisher kind of created MCP, or this might be site where we're working together with multiple publishers to, offer this access. And so we're going to turn off web search. We're going to turn on site, which is already on, and then we're going to run this, right? And so here, very similar to what you'd expect with Claude or with ChatGPT. What is different is it's taking this prompt, and sorry, I don't know how to move zoom around, but it's right in my way. Um, it's calling site, it's searching these things, it's running these different steps. So search the paper, didn't result, unearth relevant research and pursue deeper investigation. You can see here what it's starting to do, right? The second paper seems particularly relevant. Okay, now it's investigating mechanisms. You can open this up. And again, you're starting to see this thought process. They're doing this because, towards that pull, the tool designers, us, but also Claude, recognize that trust is an important thing. So it's not enough to just show this blinking and then magically give you an answer. It's walking you through these different steps. So it's done a search, it's identified an article. Even in this case, it's retrieving a full text from the article that it's going deeper on, right? So you might start with these citation snippets. You might run into a paywall. Maybe you get access again through an MCP. You get a full text, and then it starts to generate this answer. And so we'll give it a few seconds before I show you a preloaded one, but it should start to populate that. At least I hope it will start to populate it so we don't have too much of a silence. Again, starting to look at full text. Maybe what I can say while this goes, and we can jump back over there, is, this is similar to site, right? So here's trisomy, increase the rate of chromosome misaggregation in cancer cells. A key difference from site that you will see even across these tools is that, citations is kind of like what we're all about, right? So it is starting to go deeper. It's giving you a much more reference example. It's not just trying to find you only one answer. In this case, you can see it's giving you a very good answer because it references me. It's a joke. But it will start to look at citations. You can see these citations, see how has it been cited, has it been supported, and then here's what I mean by knowledge objects, right? So it's looking at this information, and you can see we show that cells with trisomy 7 or 13 display rates of aneuploidy lagging chromosomes that are significantly higher than their euploid counterparts. That's maybe a lot of words that we're not all used to, but it is basically saying, extra copies, so trisomy 3 versus 2 of 13 or 7 chromosome have more problems when they divide, right? And you can see that here. And so that way of trusting, that way of referencing, and that way of verifying against the knowledge object are all pretty critical. And I think, the big difference here is that we've done this in partnership with publishers to display this information. It's not just going to only OA or only abstracts. And so we come back here. Okay, it's still doing more, so it's investigating, it's now synthesizing. It's even got some funny terms, hunted for experimental evidence. And let's see, if it starts to give you this response. Again, this is a prototype. It looks like it had a problem getting that full text of that paper, so maybe that's why it hung up a little bit. But it will start to produce this. And so this is where we're actively working on developing authentication, developing, improvements around stability, but also making sure, the tool is being called in the correct way. So here, based on the scientific literature, yes, it does, right? So it is giving you an answer, and then it's starting to source these answers with references. And already, difference from Claude to Cite is you can't easily hover over Hinson at all and see that that's true, right? This is quoting that. Is that an actual quote? And so, I think these things with Cite and the platform that we're developing, it's not that we are going all into Claude and these other tools. It's just that we're trying to kind of meet users where they are and bring some of our functionality. And so part of our design is to help, display this information better in ways. And that's what we're actively working on, because I would say, okay, yes, I think Hinson is an actual real one. I can click these DOIs and go see that they're real. But, how do I verify that? How do I look at that knowledge object? The other thing we're doing, with these articles is, get me access to these articles. Is through our API exposing the ability if it's open access, if it's in a subscription, if it's in a token, etc. And so here, Claude wants to check the rights from sites. So now it's looking at these. We're going to allow it, and it's going to say, are there generative AI rights? Is it open access? Do I have access to this? Can I use a token? Do I have a subscription, etc.? And so, as Chris mentioned, we are using OA articles. And so it correctly says that these are OA articles. You can just get them by going to the link. But this preview is to kind of give you, a way to start to imagine what does this world look like when there is this full bridge, when your collection at the university can access your collection, not just OA content, but can look at it, can source it, and can start to bring that trustworthiness and all the things that, we think are important as information professionals into these tools where a lot of people are starting to live. And so here's what it looks like on ChatGPT. Again, it's a similar connector. You might also notice there's Hinson et al., right? It's starting to show these things. It shows it in different ways. And yes, it's giving you references as well. And so it's a variety of different tools that we're starting to integrate into different ways that will look at this. And then at site, we will continually make improvements here because we are able to do more with our content in this space, right? We are not able to put every single paywalled article here. We are starting to work with publishers to bridge the gap between generative AI and paywalled articles for, the universities and different organizations that are using ChatGPT or Copilot in a way where they can use that content, copyright compliant, ethically, and in a way that provides the best sources. As Chris mentioned, it's not just bringing these tools into these different areas and synthesizing them. It is also looking at our reads, right? And so this is, again, a working prototype, but you can start to see which journals are being called, which tools are being used. Here's OpenAI, here's Claude. Ultimately, we think organizations shouldn't have to guess. I guess students are using it, I don't know how, but they will start to license these things equitably. The students will use it, and you can see, okay, this student is using this tool, they're using this one. Here's how much time this journal is being AI read, right? So it's value, right? It is providing answers. It's not just that the humans are reading it anymore, it's that the AI is reading it. And so I think this is important for publishers. It's also important for organizations that are subscribing or licensing research articles, and putting us all on the same page of like, okay, this is where it's being used, it's being discovered, etc. And yeah, are actively working on this, and are open to contributing with publishers on this as well. And so that's a teaser. We are going to open up a sign up, I think, for people to get early access to give feedback. It is largely working, but authentication needs some more steps. And then we want to do some design changes and tweaks as well so that it works well in the tools I've shown you and also works well in new tools. And so I will maybe turn it back over to Julia and then also leave some room for questions.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. I just pulled up a quick kind of like pop up here. As Josh and Chris mentioned, we are launching the site MCP soon, and we are looking for early testers. If you are right now using Claude or ChatGPT and you would like to be one of the early ones to test this and provide feedback, help us further build this, feel free to add your email address here, and we'll be in touch about next steps. I'm just going to keep the screen up, so feel free to add your email address here, and I think we can move forward. I think two more call outs from me, and then we'll open the floor up for all of your questions. So this is part one of our AI for Science webinar series. Part two is coming up today in 2 weeks, and we're really going behind the scenes, kind of like a technical exploration of how Site works, how Site Assistant works, and the MCP. So all of you are already signed up. I'll be sending a reminder link probably 20 minutes before the webinar goes live. You should already have it on your calendar as well. And also feel free, of course, to invite your colleagues to join if you think they'll find value in it. Okay, if you're interested in what you saw today, let me pull up the chat here. I'm just going to add a link. Feel free to reach out to our team if you have any personal questions about this, that like for your specific organization, for your specific team, company, university, feel free to reach out here. If you are a customer, Also, feel free to reach out to your account manager. But again, if you do not know who that is, you're a customer, you can use that same link and then we'll get back to you. Okay, with that being said, let's open up to Q&A. Before I read out the first few, I did see a few questions regarding the slides and the recording. And yes, definitely, I'll be sending out an email probably in a few hours, sharing the recording with all of you that you can also share with your colleagues, as well as the webinar slides. So we've got you covered there. Okay, so let's look at the question. I can definitely see quite a few here. And I also just gave you the option to upvote questions just to make sure that we answer the ones most relevant to the majority of you. So feel free to browse the questions and I'll try to answer the most upvoted ones first. Okay, so the first one is, so cite indexes and refers to articles behind publisher paywalls. Can I read the full article if a citation surfaces in my site search results?
I think it depends who you are. So if it's open access, yes, you can. If you're a university and you have entitlements through your university subscriptions, we facilitate that. And so we will show if you have access from your university library. Similar with a corporate library, if you have bought, rent it, or you have tokens, or you have a subscription, we all show that. Site is not providing end access to the full text of articles, though. It is primarily displaying the snippets, and then access is facilitated via a variety of different mechanisms. Good question.
Awesome. Yes, great question. Okay, the next one is the most upvoted for now. So thank you for jumping right in and helping with your votes. How does cite handle retracted articles and predatory journals? Does it know not to cite them?
Yeah, so we have we kind of look at this in a few different ways, right? So one is, there's a lot of debates over what is predatory. Some will say this is obviously predatory, others will say no, and then some will say, this has APC, so it's predatory. And so in general, we do work with a variety of different groups to try and look at is this a predatory journal or not? And so these are, previously published lists from librarians, Beale's list, Cabell's, etc., and a variety of other different lists to kind of look at this. We also do take feedback directly from some of our users where they say this is predatory, it doesn't fit on these lists, and then we'll evaluate that internally and discuss and make a decision. In general, we are, I would say, focused on increased coverage, right? And so, some of these other tools I referenced, Scopus and Web of Science, will not have a lot of journals that, are from developing countries, third world countries, and we think it's important to include those. And so in Site Assistant, and maybe this is a long way of answering your question, we exclude retracted studies. So you won't get them. Even if you try, I think, by definition, it is excluded. We do have very good retraction and editorial information. We have published a paper also on that, and we have done some enrichment over the publicly available sources. We've also made that code and data open because I think it's critical. But in Site Assistant, these will largely be excluded because we are excluding them by definition. And so that is excluding predatory journals from some of these lists, and that is excluding retracted studies. And so you certainly will avoid that. I think the other important thing is that not just retracted studies, but think about a study that has been challenged or contrasted, right? We do also show, hey, this article, here's how many times it's been cited. And I think, yeah, retractions are maybe easier to point out and say bad. I would say they're less of a problem compared to reproducibility, where people are cutting corners and maybe it's not a reproducible study at all. It looks good, it's published in a good journal, it comes from a reputable institution, but it's wrong, right? And I think that is a bigger challenge. It's maybe a less nefarious challenge that we have to deal with. And I think that's why context matters. And I think that's why our smart citations are important for that as well.
Awesome. Yes, this is great. Thank you so much for diving in here. Can the GPT generate articles based on snippets dug up by cite?
Yeah, it can. So, we have maybe too many models as options. We've actually made some improvements, though, to now help guide you which model you can use. Some of these are deep reasoning models. Some of these have, large context windows. You can write a 15-page report that's fully referenced. I wouldn't say you should do that and just do it and copy it and submit it. These are tools to help you draft a better essay or to draft a better document report. And so that will be looking at that And yes, you can use LLMs, whether that's Cite or whether that's other tools, to start to draft papers. And I think it can be based on just a search. You can create a search, or you can also give it and say, hey, here's the references in my reference library. Only use those references for that. And so there's a lot of ways of, I would say, through our settings, kind of constraining the power or the beast of ChatGPT and helping you do something trustworthy.
Awesome. Okay, interesting question. Is the site connector available in Perplexity?
It is not yet, but again, MCP is a standard now that will be available for all. And so I think it could be, right? This MCP kind of works across a lot of others. It's just we generally have to take subscriptions to test it out. And so it should be and will be, I would say, across Perplexity, Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, kind of all of them. So yeah, look for that.
Awesome. Maybe a good comment here. Feel free to also follow us on our social media channels. Of course, we're on LinkedIn. You can find us Facebook, even Instagram, X. So feel free to follow us, and you'll always be the first to know if we actually have anything new available. Okay, can we export references to any reference management tool?
Yes, you can. We do that in pretty much every page you can find. So you can save as a RIS, as a BibTeX, or like copy it out as a pre-formatted reference at the article page, at the search page, at dashboard page. We do also have integrations directly with reference managers, Zotero, Mendeley. And so you can pull in information. You can also bring some information out of that through a different ways, right? Generally, a RIS file, I think, is probably the easiest way to do that. So yeah, make it easy to go back and forth between reference managers.
Yes, 100%. Where does Cite start and, for example, ChatGPT end and vice versa? Does Cite, for example, train on on anything? Is it more kind of a search engine? Is Cite evaluating citation and makes the prompt for ChatGPT to use that information? And she also
Yeah,
asked if this is related to maybe part two of this webinar series, so feel free to refer to that as well.
so we are, I would say, utilizing ChatGPT. So we're not doing any training here. We are saying, okay, ChatGPT is powerful for asking questions, for doing synthesis, and we have a unique citation index, right? And so you'll start to see a variety of tools. We're not the only one. Go from here's a traditional search and discovery tool, and here's the difference of our data, to here's a search and discovery tool with AI, right? And we're not so dissimilar in that, where we started as pure search and discovery based on a next generation citation index, and we adapted LLMs to that system, right? And so you have Site Assistant, where it's like a ChatGPT, or like a Claude, because we use both of those models agnostically, and you as a user get to choose them. What is different is the underlying data that is being applied to, and then there's no training there. And with that said, the MCP that I showed is just OA to begin with, right? We do want to work with publishers to start to provide non-OA content. And I think that also relates a bit to another question I see here, which is what about publishers you don't have, right? If you don't have Elsevier, if you don't have Springer Nature, some of the stuff we're doing around the MCP stuff is directly to think about that, right? How do we, as an intermediary between publishers, whether that's through DocDel, whether that's through subscription management, whether that's through search and discovery, how do we help facilitate some of this? And so this MCP, we're looking to create as a benefit to users, but also as a way for publishers to start to expose their content through Cite to LLMs in a way that is protected, that's measured, and that's authenticated. And so hopefully some of these larger publishers that are maybe holdouts will start to take us up on that. And we're actively in discussions with a variety of different publishers.
Awesome. Okay, we're 1 more minute. Okay, let's see how many questions we can fit in 1 minute. If not, we'll take these offline and I'll ask some of my team members to reach out to you via email. Okay, will the Cite MCP connector be free of service for current Cite subscribers?
Yes.
Awesome, that was quick. Okay. In my searches using Cite, it seems that often many citations are grouped in the main category, number of mentioning citation statements, and only a small share in the two other qualifying categories, which is supporting and contrasting. What would explain this observation?
I think it is the fact that researchers are incentivized to be novel, right? You're not rewarded with tenure and promotion or even like being published in a high impact journal for publishing something that someone also has published. And so we're incentivized based on novelty. And so we're always trying to publish something new. And so supporting and contrasting citations are a part of it because we do build off of, the shoulders of giants. But, it's not that every single new paper is just repeating it. And so I think it's natural. If you think about the research you've done, yes, you will reproduce some things. Yes, you will support some things. But out of your 40, 50 references that you use, most are not that. Some are establishing backgrounds. Some are, hey, I use this method section, etc. And so I think that explains it.
Awesome. Perfect. And right on time. Love it. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending this hour with us. We do hope that you found lots of value in it. Remember that we're going live with part 2 in 2 weeks. So dial in then, invite your colleagues to follow along. And thank you so much, Josh and Chris, for presenting today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We will get to
Thanks.
the questions too. I see a lot of good ones, and so sorry we had to run. I can only speak so fast. Cheers, guys.
We'll follow up. See you all.
Bye.
Bye.